There's one other operation that we haven't talked about that a table saw can make. It's called dados, garus, and rabbits. This particular blade can do it, but we have another saw in the shop called a dado saw, and it can do it. And it's a table saw with a wider blade in it is all it is. We can construct or create these types of woodworking joints known as dados and rabbits in a single pass. I'm going to go over there now and demonstrate how to make a rabbit and a dado. And I'm going to demonstrate that everything that you've learned so far on the table saw applies to the dado saw. Okay? As far as margin of safety, push shoes, push sticks, making sure that your stock is on the other side of the fence before you get started. Alright, basically the rules of the dado saw are the same as that with the table saw. You'll notice one big difference about the dado saw is it's got naturally a wider blade surface area, but there's no splitter. Because if there was a splitter, you wouldn't be able to do rabbits, dados. You'd have to. It would become worthless. You'd be making a groove or a dado, and the splitter wouldn't be serving its purpose. So the splitter's not there. I'm going to put the throat plate back on. Have to lower this down a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and set it for approximately 1/4 of an inch. Okay, that's the height of the blade. Now, one thing about this is 4-inch margin of safety. Make sure that no one is behind you. It's basic same body stance. If we're going to make a rabbit per se, we're going to make a rabbit on the side here, on the end there, we need a miter gauge. Again, I couldn't come over here and think that I'd have any sort of chance of making this a decent cut. Or better yet, if I needed to make a series of dados across here, again, I couldn't do it this way. I'll also need a gauge block, if you will. Basically, I would have to have some sort of block. I'd put a clamp right here to hold it so that, same thing, when I go to do my dado, I have a space between my fence and the end of my stock. Okay? That's very important. I don't want to be touching 1, 2, 3. Don't want to do it. If I can have space here in case something goes wrong, I'm much more comfortable and have less chance of a kickback or a bind on the saw. Now, let me ask you this. Since I'm only doing a rabbit here, and I'm only coming up 1/4 of an inch, the shoulder is going to be roughly a 1/2 inch. Do I need to not worry about my margin of safety because the blade's not coming all the way through the wood? Absolutely you do. You have to be aware of where that blade is at all times and maintain that 4-inch margin of safety. So, can I run this rabbit up against there? Okay, can I do that? Yes, I can. Because if something was to go wrong, I can come off of it this way. I'm not, basically, that blade is not totally submersed in this when I'm making a dado. It's not, let me back up. On a dado, I would need that spacer block if I was making a dado, so I'd come off of it. But on a rabbit, if something goes wrong, I just come off the fence. I don't need that spacer block. Let me demonstrate that to you. Turn it on. Your hands are 4 inches away from the blade. Okay. And that's a rabbit. This is what a rabbit looks like. You can run along the end grain. Perhaps I would have something that would come and sit on there. Or I could run it with the grain. So if I ran it with the grain, simply put, I have my push stick here. Same body language, same body position. My hand is here, 4 inches away from the blade. Notice that this hand is not moving. a groove. Well, a groove would be all the way down the center, running this way, except it would look like a U, and a dado would be across the grain. I'm going to demonstrate that to you right now, what a dado is going to look like. I'll just randomly pick a spot. I do need a gauge block, so I'll be right back. Okay, what I'm attempting to do is I'm going to try and make a dado right here where this black magic marker is. And what I'm going to have to do, I have a gauge block here that's going to allow me to come off and not bind up between the blade and the fence. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to my mark, I'm going to find this tooth right here, line it up while I'm still on my gauge block, snug down the fence, micro adjust it, lock the fence. Now this is that rule that we were talking about. I have less than 12 inches here across its width. So I certainly wouldn't want to try and do this. Right now, it's binding right now as I'm trying to come through it. Imagine with a spinning blade. So I have to use a miter gauge. Place the miter gauge there. Make sure, check it for 90 degrees. This distance, just so you'll know, okay, this distance is 5.5 inches from the slot to the edge of that blade. Our margin of safety is 4. So if I keep my hands relatively here, I'm within that 4 inches. I'm good. Okay? If I was here, even though that blade's not coming all the way through, remember what I asked you earlier. I asked you, what happens if this wood was to disappear? Where are your hands? Your hands are in the blade. So what you want to make sure is, anytime you're doing any woodworking operation, if you can at all help it, make sure your hands are out of the way of spinning blades. Okay? So let's go ahead and make a dado here. Clear the blade, slide your lumber out of the way, and come back. There's the dado right there. Now, if I wanted it to be equal distance from the end on this side to this side, I'd simply just turn it around. Same gauge block, fence is still locked. And there we go. I have 2 dados that are equal from each end. Turn off the blade. Do not walk away from the saw with the blade spinning. Stand here. Remember, this is your work domain. Don't let anybody near it until that blade stops spinning. Now I could walk away if I needed to go and get more lumber. Don't ever leave a machine on and come over here to grab your stack. Make sure that everything you need is right here when you start. And then when you're done, you remove everything and put the saw and the guards and anything that might have changed or been altered in any way for a special setup goes back to the next student or person can use it safely. This is a dado. This is a rabbit. This is a rabbit. Now I'm going to perform a groove. Remember, I'll remove this stop block or gauge block. And if I want to groove, say, for whatever reason, it doesn't matter. Let's say I want to groove right down here. Remove the miter gauge. Make sure this edge is nice and straight, which it is. Let's see that. So let's say somewhere in there centered. Now, at this particular junction, I can keep my hand right here, which is 4 inches away from that blade, and then as I get comfortable with it, I come around the back side of it and keep it tight to the fence because I don't have a splitter. What I really would like to see students do is take the time, set up a feather board, and what I'm going to do is demonstrate two of them to you. I have one that's a magnetic one, and what its job is to do, basically, and how it works, it's a strong magnet. It keeps the board tight to the fence, so I don't have to worry about keeping it in there so much. Once I get it set, okay, now when this magnet is in there tight, I can't pull that back if I wanted to. Okay, I can push it forward, but it's awfully hard for me to pull this back. All right. I also have the option of running this one here, this out, over here, and now when I come through there, this will also keep pressure down on there, so I don't have to put my hands there. But what I also want to do is I want to demonstrate putting a feather board on top of here. And a feather board is basically a series of cuts that will allow the wood to go in one direction, but not in the other. As the wood pushes through, the fingers move out of the way, but as it tries to come back, they bend and push it down harder. Okay? So you can see that they move out of the way one way, but the other way, they would push it down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up right over the blade, because I want that groove to be a uniform height all the way through the cut. Okay. All right. So now, before I turn on anything, because I have a fixture here, okay, on this piece of equipment, and another one here, I want to make sure that before I turn it on, that nothing is going to hit any of my fixtures. So the blade's fine. I still am going to need a push stick. And I'm going to have a little bit of a delimiter. Okay, I can see it right now before I even start. Because of the way that this clamp is, this feather board, and because of this hold down right here, a push stick for me to clear it off the blade is not going to be feasible. You can see I hit it right there. So I'm just going to have to remove this before I even get started and count on this feather board to keep my piece flat to the table saw. Okay? Lumber's on the non-working side of the fence. Turn on. Now, at no time did my hands ever get closer than 4 inches to that blade. There's a nice groove. This is a groove because it runs with the grain. Rabbit. Dado Saw. Okay? You could use this, folks, for making, like I said, if this was wider and you needed a shelf, you had a shelf, let's say, boom. You would have another one on the other side, and obviously you'd have a shelf. Or the back. Very good. Whoops. All the way. Okay. So for whatever reason, whatever your joinery, whatever you needed, I mean, this is a saw that has a bad reputation, but with proper education, proper technique, and taking a little time to set up some safety fixtures or some feather boards or hold downs, or even new technology that's out there on the market. This is a fantastic saw, and a saw that all you students will need to become familiar with and competent at using. So if there are any questions, please feel free to ask your instructor. Maybe something I said didn't make sense to you, or you don't quite understand it. If there's any part of this film that you don't understand so far, please review it, go back, get your textbook, ask your instructor. Before you do any type of woodworking, if you are unsure in any way, doesn't feel right, make sure you ask for assistance. If it doesn't feel safe or right to you, it probably is not going to be. Okay? So good luck and happy woodworking.